What if a goodbye was never whispered? What if the curtain fell without warning, mid-scene, while the spotlight still burned bright? In the early hours of a cold December morning in Los Angeles, a young woman lay motionless on the bathroom floor of her Hollywood Hills home. Her breath was shallow, her skin pale, her voice silent. A few hours later, she would be pronounced dead at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. The official report would mention pneumonia, anemia, prescription medications. But that was just the surface. Behind the closed doors of that house, something more fragile had been unraveling for months. A life, a career, a spirit fading quietly in the very city that once embraced her with fame. She had once lit up the screen with electric energy, her voice soft yet distinctive, her presence both quirky and captivating. To millions, she was the girl who made every scene feel like magic. But in this moment, she was no longer a starlet. She was a daughter, a wife, a fading light. There were no paparazzi outside that morning, no red carpet, no press junket, just the sound of an ambulance pulling away and a mother staring at the ground, holding on to a silence that would never be broken. She didn't leave a note. She didn't leave instructions. She didn't even say goodbye. And yet, in her final moments, the world would begin to ask a question that still lingers today. How could Brittany Murphy die like this? Long before tragedy made her a question mark in Hollywood's memory, Brittany Murphy was a comet brilliant, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. With her wild curls, wide-eyed expressions, and raspy, unmistakable voice, she seemed to break every mold the industry tried to fit her into. She didn't arrive in Hollywood to be just another pretty face. She came to leave a mark. And she did. Her breakout role as Ty Frazier in Clueless, 1995, was more than just a teenage supporting character. It was a transformation. She took a shy, awkward girl and made her unforgettable. In the years that followed, she delivered performances that stretched from comedic to heartbreaking. The vulnerable Daisy in Girl, Interrupted, the tough yet tender Alex in 8 Mile, and the lovably chaotic Sarah in Just Married. The industry adored her versatility. Directors described her as fearless and unfiltered. Roger Ebert once said she had a spark that lit up the dullest dialogue. She was the kind of actress who could cry on cue and make you cry with her. She didn't just act, she felt and made others feel, too. But there was always something slightly off-center about Brittany, something that made her feel more like a raw nerve than a polished starlet. Unlike many of her peers, she wasn't molded by the industry. She remained unfiltered, emotionally honest, and almost too fragile for the machinery of fame. Her interviews were quirky, her movements unpredictable. It made her charming. It also made her vulnerable. By the early 2000s, her name was everywhere. Red carpets, tabloids, romantic comedies, indie dramas. She voiced Gloria the Penguin in Happy Feet. She dated famous men. She danced on late-night shows. And still, she often seemed like someone chasing something she couldn't name. Then, the rumors began. She looked thinner, tired. In some red carpet photos, her smile seemed forced. Reports surfaced of on-set instability. She was allegedly let go from productions without explanation. Whispers about her mental health, her weight, and her relationships began to cloud the career she had built with such effort. Still, she insisted everything was fine. "I'm just a little misunderstood," she once said with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. Behind the camera flashes and magazine spreads, something was changing. And though the public continued to cheer for her, few realized how much of Brittany Murphy's light was already starting to dim. In the weeks leading up to her death, Brittany Murphy had nearly disappeared from public view. The once vibrant actress whose laugh could light up a room now spent most of her time behind the thick walls of her Hollywood Hills mansion. She rarely left. When she did, she seemed different. Neighbors described her as ghost-like. Close friends said she had grown withdrawn and paranoid. She believed people were out to get her. She refused to see doctors, despite chronic symptoms, shortness of breath, dizziness, and an uncontrollable cough. Her husband, Simon Monjack, reportedly discouraged medical visits, convinced they would only bring negative press. In her final interview, Brittany's words carried a strange weight. "I'm okay," she said softly. Just tired. Just not myself lately." Her voice, once filled with sparkle, sounded distant, as though she were speaking from behind a veil. She brushed off questions about her health, but there was a pause, a flicker of something unspoken. A week before her death, she collapsed briefly on set during a small filming project in Puerto Rico. The crew recalled that she looked sickly, pale, almost transparent. They wrapped early, citing exhaustion. Brittany flew home. Back at the mansion, the air felt different. Cold. Still. Her mother, Sharon, who lived with Brittany and Simon, later recalled that her daughter had grown unusually quiet. She would stare at the window for long stretches, saying little, sleeping poorly. At times, she would cry without explanation. Something was happening, something invisible, yet heavy. And as if sensing the inevitable, Brittany made one final call to a friend 2 days before she died. "Pray for me," she whispered. "I don't feel safe anymore." It was a quiet Sunday morning, the 20th of December, 2009. The sun had not yet broken through the gray Los Angeles sky. Inside the house on Rising Glen Road, silence reigned, save for the shallow coughs coming from the master bathroom. Brittany had been awake all night. She was restless, weak, her body racked with fits of coughing and chills. She had told her mother she was cold, so cold, she had barely eaten. Her skin was pale, almost translucent. At some point that morning, she tried to make her way to the bathroom. And that's where her mother found her, collapsed on the floor, unconscious, her breathing labored and shallow. 911 was called at 8 a.m. Sharon Murphy's voice on the emergency call was frantic, trembling. "She's not breathing right. She's passed out. Please, someone come." Paramedics arrived minutes later. They found Brittany lying near the shower, unresponsive. The tiles beneath her were slick. Her pulse was faint. For nearly 45 minutes, they tried to revive her. CPR, adrenaline, oxygen, nothing worked. At 10:04 a.m., Brittany Murphy was pronounced dead at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. She was just 32. The hospital staff said little. The body was taken away discreetly, no flashing lights, no cameras, no press outside, just a lingering fog and the sound of one life being written into past tense. Back at the house, her husband Simon stood in shock. Her mother wept in silence, clutching a piece of Brittany's clothing to her chest. Outside, the world went on, unaware that a bright light had just flickered out behind the curtains of a seemingly ordinary home. And yet, nothing about that morning was ordinary. News of Brittany Murphy's death didn't break immediately. For a few precious hours, her name remained unspoken by the media, hidden behind hospital walls and unanswered calls. But when it finally surfaced, the reaction was instant and electric. Actress Brittany Murphy dead at 32. The headlines spread like wildfire across screens and news tickers. Social media erupted. Paparazzi swarmed the gates of her home. Fans stood frozen in disbelief. It wasn't just that she had died, it was how she had died. So young, so suddenly, so quietly. At the morgue, the initial autopsy report was inconclusive. No signs of trauma, no clear evidence of overdose. The body was thin, frail. Her heart had stopped, but why? Toxicology tests were ordered. The results would take weeks. In the meantime, rumors began to multiply. Had she relapsed? Was it anorexia? Prescription abuse? The tabloids pounced on every angle. The same media that once adored her now dissected her legacy with surgical coldness. They published her worst photos, recycled every whisper, invented new ones. The official statement from her publicist was brief, respectful, vague. Brittany Murphy passed away this morning due to apparent natural causes. The family asks for privacy, but privacy was already gone. Cameras lined the street. Reporters camped outside. Fans left flowers, candles, and handwritten notes at the gate. Some stood there for hours, tears streaming down their cheeks, trying to understand how someone who once brought them so much joy could vanish like this. For many, the pain was personal. Brittany wasn't just a celebrity, she was the girl next door, the quirky friend, the underdog you rooted for. Her death didn't feel like a headline, it felt like a loss inside the family. And the questions were only beginning. When the coroner's report was finally released weeks later, The cause of death was listed as a combination of pneumonia, iron deficiency, anemia, and multiple drug intoxication from prescription and over-the-counter medications, none of which were illegal or in overdose quantities. It sounded clinical, almost ordinary, but the public didn't buy it. How could a vibrant 32-year-old woman die of pneumonia in a city of world-class hospitals while living in a mansion surrounded by family? How could a condition so treatable become fatal unless something or someone prevented her from seeking help? And then, 5 months later, the story took a darker turn. Simon Monjack, Brittany's husband, was found dead in the same home, in the same bedroom, by the same person, her mother. The cause? Pneumonia and anemia, identical, 2 deaths, 5 months apart. Same house, same symptoms, same outcome. Suddenly, the whispers turned into roars. Was the house toxic? A report surfaced that the home had high levels of black mold, a potentially deadly fungus. But the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health said there was no conclusive evidence that mold played a role in either death. Case closed. Still, Brittany's father was unconvinced. He commissioned an independent toxicology test, this time on strands of her hair. The findings? Elevated levels of 10 heavy metals, including antimony and barium elements often associated with rat poison. Was Brittany poisoned? The theory gained traction. Some pointed fingers at Simon, who had a history of fraud, manipulation, and control. Others blamed the mother. Some even suggested both deaths were part of a larger, more sinister cover-up, one that Hollywood itself wanted buried. But there was no investigation, no arrests, no justice. Just silence. The bathroom where Brittany Murphy collapsed remained untouched for weeks. A pale towel still hung from the hook. Bottles of vitamins and cold medicine lined the marble counter. A faint trace of perfume lingered in the air, familiar, feminine, fading. The lights were left on. No one could bring themselves to turn them off. It wasn't just a room, it was a scene frozen in time. There were no suicide notes, no dramatic gestures, no farewell messages scribbled on mirrors. Just silence and the weight of everything that had gone unsaid. In a drawer, they found a handwritten list of groceries. A half-finished script for a film she'd hoped to produce. A birthday card never sent. On her nightstand was a framed photo of her younger self, smiling brightly on the set of Clueless back when everything still felt possible. The home, once filled with laughter and dreams, had become a tomb of unanswered questions. Within 5 months, 2 lives were lost, and the only person left to turn off the lights was Brittany's mother. She eventually moved out, leaving the house vacant, abandoned, and then came the final insult. In 2011, Brittany's belongings were auctioned off: her passport, clothes, photos, even her signed scripts. The pieces of her life reduced to price tags. Fans protested. Friends called it heartbreaking, but there was no one left to stop it. That bright, chaotic, beautiful soul, so full of hope, was now just another tabloid headline, another Hollywood mystery filed away. And in that cold, dim room where it all ended, the light switch remained on, as if she might walk back in at any moment. But she never would. Hollywood is used to loss. It stages tragedy. It packages grief. But some deaths cut deeper, not because of the fame, but because of the feeling that someone was taken before the story could be finished. That's how it was with Brittany Murphy. In the days following her death, tributes began to pour in, not from headlines or press agents, but from the people who had actually known her. Co-stars, directors, stylists, assistants, they all said the same thing. Brittany was light, kind, generous. Strange, in the best way. A little scattered, a little chaotic, but never cruel, and always full of heart. Ashton Kutcher, who had dated Brittany and co-starred with her in Just Married, tweeted simply, "Today, the world lost a little piece of sunshine." Eminem called her a natural talent, remembering their time filming 8 Mile and how she brought authenticity to every scene. Alicia Silverstone, her Clueless co-star, said she was like a hummingbird, beautiful, fragile, and full of life. Fans created online memorials. Hundreds gathered outside her home, leaving candles, photographs, notes written in trembling hands. One read, "You were my favorite. You still are." But there was more than sadness. There was anger. People questioned how someone so loved, so visibly suffering, could slip through the cracks. How a city built on dreams could be so blind to a slow-motion nightmare. Brittany had once said in an interview, "I just want people to know I'm real. I'm not pretending. I really feel things." And that may have been her greatest gift and her greatest curse. Her death also exposed something Hollywood rarely admits: its obsession with control, perfection, and image. Brittany never fit into that box. She was messy, human, vulnerable, and when the machine couldn't mold her, it simply moved on, leaving her behind in the shadows. There were no public memorials organized by studios, no major tributes at award shows, no commemorative film festivals, just a few fleeting headlines and then silence. For a time, her legacy felt as fragile as her final days. But slowly, a quiet respect began to grow. A new generation discovered her performances, her voice, her soul on screen. Fans who were children when she died now spoke of her like an icon lost too soon. And in many ways, that's what she became: not just a cautionary tale, but a reminder. A reminder that behind every starlet is a human being. That vulnerability is not weakness. And that sometimes, the brightest lights go out the fastest not because they weren't strong, but because no one ever stopped to notice they were fading. They called it natural causes. They said it was illness. They said it was just bad timing, bad health, bad luck. But deep down, something doesn't sit right. Not with the fans who still light candles every December. Not with the friends who watched her change. Not with the people who remember the girl behind the eyes, the spark that flickered even as the cameras stopped rolling. Brittany Murphy didn't leave a letter. She didn't craft a final scene. But her life felt like a movie that ended mid-frame. No closing credits. No music cue. Just a sudden fade to black. And perhaps that's what makes her story linger. We remember her not because she died, but because we never got to say goodbye. Because we still don't know what really happened. Because her death raises more questions than it answers. Why didn't anyone step in sooner? Why did Hollywood let her drift into obscurity when once it couldn't get enough of her? Was it really pneumonia, or was it pressure, paranoia, and pain that no one took seriously? In an industry that glamorizes pain, maybe hers just wasn't dramatic enough to sell. Too subtle, too quiet, too human. But listen closely, and you can still hear her voice in old interviews, in film scenes, in bloopers where she breaks character to giggle uncontrollably. You can still feel her presence in the way she lit up a screen, not with perfection, but with vulnerability. Maybe that was her greatest role of all, not a character, but a reminder. That behind every headline is a human. That not all stars burn out, they're sometimes forgotten while still glowing. And so, in her final moments, Brittany Murphy didn't perform. She simply disappeared. No final bow, no encore, just a silence that still echoes. And somewhere, in the quietest part of Hollywood, a light remains on. Waiting, wondering, whispering. Was it ever really just about pneumonia?